Welcome to episode 21. Check out what we have in store for you this week.
Somebody comes up to you on the side of the street, hypothetically, just walks up to you and goes, "Hey, what is a wiki?" How would you answer that question?
It's a dance move.
It's
where
not
you
a
keep your
dance
elbows
move.
loose.
Like a
what?
Like a wiki. A wiki.
A wiki.
A wiki.
Let's put the silent. When Josh says we, he means him.
Okay, yes, I have a problem.
He
Let's
means
get this out of the
himself.
way right away.
Josh.
I use this app way too much. Okay, my life is embedded in this app. Welcome to the High Tech Podcast, folks. Another week. You're joined by me, Josh Swartz, and
me.
And you.
This guy.
That guy. William
What's up?
Illingworth. The Will. I don't know. I keep trying to introduce you well on all of our episodes, and then I've got nothing.
Maybe we should listen to some other podcasts with co-hosts and see what they do.
Maybe we should see what other cool people who know what they're doing do.
Overrated.
Yeah, we know we're keeping you 15 with these intros. I'm just kidding.
Thank you, all 15 of you listeners.
Thank you, those listening at this moment. Welcome guys, another week. We're excited, jumping back in here. We've been, you haven't seen us be off, but we've been off for a little bit, so it's good to get back into recording and talking about that technology and education and things. But before we do, let's jump into what we've been doing. If you've been listening to us for a little bit, right? We have this thing. I haven't come up with a name for it, but I feel like we should, it's like get to know Will and Josh, or
the personality segment.
The personality segment,
As he dances.
I got nothing. The Will and Josh corner, get into
That sounds like a sad place.
That's sad. Yeah. Anyway, question for today, right, is what was your first driving experience like? I feel like all of our listeners have been clamoring, Will, to know what your first driving experience has been like.
Whatever happened? Everyone's shouting, knocking on the door downstairs. Tell us.
Yeah.
For me, it does actually kind of stand out. I've actually been I got my license and permit as soon as possible kind of stuff. I failed my first driver's test, so I had to wait a month or whatever to take it the second time. But I love driving. Yeah, who has flipped a car here?
Hey,
we're
not talking about accidents, are we? No,
not me.
We're not.
Ooh, there's the question for another episode.
No one's clamoring to hear that. You hear that? That's the silence of our listeners. Sorry, continue your story.
The earliest one that comes to mind, it's kind of a three-parter. So there was this, I just remember my father taking me, maybe I was 14, maybe 15, parking lot here, use the accelerator. And I remember putting my foot on the gas and being terrified. Like the car lurched forwards. I just wasn't expecting, I didn't have this idea of what it took to put your foot on the gas and feather it a little bit. So I just gunned it. But no, the first time I actually drove, I had my permit. My dad took me to the church parking lot, and so from the church parking lot, you can drive away, kind of thing. And I remember it was the first time you get that lesson, look right, look left, look right, kind of thing, or whatever it is. Because we're at a stop sign, he's like, make sure you look, make sure you check it before you go. And I'm still not really great with this accelerator thing, and so
it's
I look.
A minor part of it.
I look, I don't see a car. I look back and there's a car, but I'm already accelerating. He's like, well, if you did, it was a bad pullout. I was going to probably hit this person if I went slow. He's like, all right, gun it. I started pulling out. My dad's just like, hit it. If you're going to do it, do it. Don't get them. Don't let them hit you or don't hit them, because I did not look before I hit the accelerator. I hit the accelerator too soon and then had to gun it.
Oh.
So that's the one that comes to mind.
Okay.
What about you?
Oh, that's good. Mine, I was similar. So those who don't know me, my dad, helps run a dealership. And so I had some good car experiences, and some of the early ones were driving around on their lot. I don't know if we were allowed to or not. So if you get in trouble for this, I'm sorry. We're drive around this pole, and things like that. But my first memorable driving experience on the road, you gotta understand, okay? My birthday is in January, so a lot of early driving experiences was during winter for me, okay? Here in Pennsylvania, so all I remember is going out and driving on back roads after it had snowed and then poured rain down, right? And so your point, I I didn't have all the, best practices for driving down at this point, or like, what we should be doing. And I just remember, like, I'm driving, and all of a sudden, like, I hit this massive puddle. And just like hydroplaned, and we swerved a little bit, and we were like moving. I just remember my dad being like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm driving. That's what you told me to do. We go forward. I hit gas, car goes, I go with it. That's what happens." Okay.
I can just see your dad. What are you doing?
And he's like, "Well, you don't speed up over puddles." And I was like, "Since when? When is that a thing?" "Well, that's always been a thing." "Well, I didn't know that. I just started driving."
Told me.
Yeah.
It looked fun.
Nobody told me this was the understood way of driving. Okay. So I didn't do that. And I hydroplaned a bit. And then there's a few long history of, I almost hit a car in a parking lot. It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah,
but
the easy stuff.
right? We're learning how to drive for the first time, Will. Both of our mistakes are from what? Not really, knowing,
Having the right information.
having the right information, not having the lay of the
missing
land.
some things.
We're missing some terminology and things. Like we both apparently didn't understand the brake. Okay, that's a thing we didn't understand. Which is
It would be really nice if I had a glossary definition of turning.
or like I don't
with
know,
some
like a wiki,
helpful
of some
examples.
sort, like a
what?
like a wiki. A wiki.
A wiki.
A wiki.
Let's put the silent H in there and really bring it out.
Yeah, it really makes it better. No, okay. So, this is a perfect segue that makes so much sense into our topic today, which is, what is the wiki? Okay? Some of you may be listening today because you were like, I don't know what a wiki is.
It's a dance move, right?
Yeah, it's, no.
You wiki?
Those of
Wiki.
you don't have video right now, but be glad you don't, okay? Because Will is dancing, and it's not pleasant. So, what is a wiki? That's what we're going to talk about today, right? This is a thing that we use in education that is not a dance. Probably most of you, when you hear wiki, if you're at least in our generation, you think Wikipedia, probably. I feel like that's the first thing I think of when I hear wiki. But I'm going to pose this question to you first, Will, because I've been doing a lot of talking. And, you don't want to hear me for a long time. So somebody comes up to you on the side of the street, hypothetically, just walks up to you and goes, "Hey, what is a wiki?" How would you answer that question?
It's a dance move.
It's
where
not
you keep
a
your
dance
elbows
move.
Loose. I'm in my mind, for those who are not able to see, I'm kind of like conflating the wobble with like just poor white man dance. It's just
which is
what's happening
apparently
right now.
the wiki.
So wikis in the academic sense are, and it really does, it is the root of Wikipedia, not just like language association. Like it's this idea of bringing together knowledge and creating a shared space of terms, definitions, maybe examples. Like wiki's a pretty loose tool. You can put a lot of different things into it, and that's kind of the value of it, right? It can really meet you where you are if you're like in an engineering set context or humanities or even art. Like each of those might create a wiki of content that that either the instructor creates to show stuff to the students, or the students would be a part of creating the wiki. That's actually the learning experience more typically, that the instructor might provide, for instance, the list of terms, but then the students are the ones that fill in information about the terms. Or let's just say the wiki's about 1960, right? And then the students have to fill in information about 1960 according to specific categories. Engineering, maybe it's a type of hydraulics, maybe it's, ergonomics, maybe it's, agriculture. Any of your topics, you really could have students building out a wiki's worth of information about it. Now, as we think about Wikipedia, right, you type in Martin Luther King Jr. and you get a whole page about him, and it's cross-linked and cross-referenced out to other Wikipedia pages and more information. So that would be the goal of a wiki, right? The end result would be the full page. At an academic sense, the instructor, you could say you want it to be narrative form, right? If you pull up Martin Luther King Jr.'s Wikipedia page, it's going to be a narrative description of Martin Luther King Jr. So you could say the same thing for your students. I want you to fill in a wiki page in narrative form, 3 to 4 paragraphs on each of these people, each of these art movements, each of these cultural, time frames, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think of like in general, the idea of wiki to me, like it came to me outside of an education context first, which is, Wikipedia. Hashtag not a sponsor. But like, and hashtag, don't use it for research papers other than finding resources that they use to make the wiki. Like that was like my first context. So when I started seeing it in like an education context when I got here, like how I would really define it when somebody would ask me is like, it's, in a sense, to me, it is bringing information into like an ordered form. That's to me what kind of wiki looks like at different times. Whether that's, we've talked about a bunch of different places where you can use a wiki, just in reference here, and it'll keep coming up. But like, I've seen people use them from like collaborative, like annotated bibliographies that they have students create, for pulling together resources and summaries, to everything to like, glossaries of terms, to narrative things. Like that's a good example of like a wiki of 1960. What are the most important events and pieces of information from 1960? Create a wiki for it. But the concept of a wiki is supposed to be that it's not just like, at one end, it's, I think, this idea of evaluating what's important information and what's accurate information, and then creating something that somebody can easily access pieces of that information quickly. Like, because we think about Wikipedia, it's so popular because it's like people just need answers to things. Like, they need to know who this person was,
That's it.
Or when this movie released, or like all of those things. Google, in a sense, in certain ways, is even a wiki. Because it's a search system, but they're gathering information together.
Much information,
right? Yeah.
And that's where one of the things that you think about when it comes to wikis, and they have been being done. They have been done.
That sentence needs worked. That's a Josh sentence, not a Will sentence.
Have been around for a while.
Yeah.
And so, like, the technologies involved with creating wikis have been everything from Word documents to physical pieces of paper to, like, today there are wiki tools, or you could even have students creating Wikipedia pages. Like, if the information's not there about something you're referencing in 1960, you could have the students create that and generate that. I've seen instructors use discussion forums to do it, Excel spreadsheets.
Gross.
I'm just there's a lot of ways to get it done. It's really the goal, I think, is really just cool to think about. It's about the content. It's about developing and creating a shared understanding. So to be a little nerdy, this really does fall in line with like a constructivist worldview or a perspective of learning, where the students are working together to construct a shared knowledge base. There's some ways that you might push back against that because they're not actually creating the knowledge. They're maybe curating or organizing the knowledge. But it's really important, I think, as a practice to have them digging into it and wrestling with that information. One of the things that we do know about learning, and things in general, even skills-based learning, is like repetition is key. Do it more times. Yeah. Have more interactions with something. That is going to help you retain the information. So having the students create a wiki is maybe one of those first steps in them interacting with or engaging the information critically and by themselves, but it's not the end-all be-all. In fact, I'm not even sure I've ever heard of a wiki being like a final exam or something, right? It's usually a learning activity in weeks 2, 5, 7 that is going to help students build information that they might use in whatever your final exam
usually like
is.
in my context, and I've seen it, is like it's an auxiliary activity that goes along with other things. And yeah, usually early on in the course is more of a focus on the wiki. Now I've seen some courses that are like, we're gonna build this wiki throughout the course, even to the end of days of our course, simply because we're trying to pull together our information. And sometimes for me, I think the line grays between like collaborative wiki and like this practice of like collaborative note taking. Sometimes there's kind of like these things gray, kind of the line between these two elements phase together a little bit for me. But again, I think the point before, like, then I want to jump into some practical examples here in a second, but I think to your point, Will, about like this, they're not necessarily like creating all of this content or information, but they are having to evaluate what information's most important. They've got to evaluate, they're creating the organization of it, like what's going to organize this well so that it makes sense. I think, you're having them kind of take some of those higher order thinking and creating and evaluating information. Like, and yes, they may be pulling from other things and other resources, but let's be honest, folks. Most of us do that every single day, because as much as we like to think our thoughts are original, they're not always.
So, and a quick example on that scale, because you mentioned you have some practical, which I want to tee up after this. But thinking of Martin Luther King Jr., for instance, so that Wikipedia page or that wiki module might include a lot of information, like he was born, where he was born, the relevance of his geographical location to the issues of slavery, racism, prejudice, segregation, etc. You would also probably include definitely something about his death and the relationship of that to the movement of segregation and things like that moving forwards, and the impact. The question, like, that you would say from a kind of a pedagogical standpoint as an instructor, do you encourage the students to include the section on conspiracy theories about him being killed? Or do you make sure that they include certain information about, his death or not? Like, there's something to the quality and the depth of information you require that goes in the wiki that can be really important, because his Wikipedia page might actually have some of that information. But is the conspiracy theory stuff, or even think JFK, right? That's very popular. People think he was actually killed by the United States government or something. Like, whatever conspiracy theories that are out there.
Yeah.
That might not be in scope for what you're trying to do. So your wikis don't have to be all-encompassing, and it's, I think, important for you to tell the students to keep certain boundaries to the content that they're bringing into it. And usually those boundaries will just be driven by whatever your course content is, right?
Yeah.
If your course content is about racism, maybe his death and his method of death is relevant if you believe that is related to the racism. If it's not, then you might not have them include information like that as they're working on it.
Yeah, I think but again, that point is that they're evaluating those elements. Like, you're giving them that definition of what it's supposed to be, and they have to use critical thinking to figure out what is out of all this information. I think that's why it's so applicable even today, of how do we evaluate digital resources that we have? How do we, the problem today is not access to information, it's actually evaluating the information we have in front of us, because I can Google anything and Google will tell me exactly what I want to hear. So, like, for the most part, pretty much. So, like, just evaluating resources, I think, is helpful. Now, a couple ways I think this plays out, right? That I've seen it. One of the most commons at the institution I work at is that we have like an activity that's a wiki activity in our online courses, and it's basically like building a collaborative wiki throughout the course, especially early on. I'd have to look back at what they do. I didn't get a chance to take a look at it before this episode, but essentially building that wiki, and a lot of it's like it's shared terms, it's shared ideas. Where I've seen this really useful is like, we have a Bible background for some of our courses. There's a lot of heavy theological terminology and things like that, and so it could be helpful to create kind of a glossary of ideas and what those things mean, how they fit. I've seen that helpful, and also annotated bibliographies. I put this into this category because I think it's similar. This idea of like collaborative annotated bibliographies, or even having a student do them by themselves. I really enjoy wikis in a digital space when they're collaborative. I think you can absolutely have students do them on their own, but I think there's a benefit to having a whole class do it together, or at least bring their stuff together and try to evaluate and kind of create I think I wrote down when we were thinking about ideas of why wikis or whatever this looks like. Like, I love the idea of like just shared language, like shared understanding in the course. Yeah. And whether that's terms, whether it's like a narrative about people, I think it could be both. Like, it's basically just about like, how do we organize the information we're learning? And it's this artifact that can be pulled out. So I've liked that. And just like even research projects too, I think wikis can be useful. It's kind of an initial thing. Like, here's this research project you're going to work on. Why don't you guys each research, your resources, kind of gather the information. Don't worry too much about, your narrative paper that you're writing and your arguments, whatever you're doing. Let's just get the information together and find them. There's a couple of examples I think I've seen of how people could use this.
I would have loved a couple of wikis like that before a few research papers we've written.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, Josh, these are some really great notions about wikis, but I really think it might be time to take the next step in this conversation. And that would be, of course, to introduce our app of the week.
Yes, not just our app of the week. Okay, folks, we need to give this
The bedrock
we need to give this
of
the
our
appropriate
podcast.
statement of what we're about to talk about. It's the bedrock of our podcast. That's really deep and probably underplaying our actual mission of dealing with ed tech and harnessing technology. But for those of you who access our website or any of the pages that we give you, they are all on this tool, which is called Notion.
Notion.
Yep, that is the app we're here to talk about today.
When Josh says we, he means him.
Okay, yes, I have a problem.
He
Let's get
means
this out of the way
himself.
right away.
Josh,
I use this app way too much. Okay, my life is embedded in this app.
when we are talking and joking about life or what's going on or tasks or chores, he's like, I was talking to my wife the other day and I made her a Notion board for something. I'm like, Josh,
Hey, she
you give away
asked.
flowers.
She
Okay, you get her
asked,
flowers.
okay?
You don't give her
She
a Notion
wasn't for
board.
work. I get her flowers. She asked for a Notion board. Okay, she asked for it. Yeah, no. Okay, so let's talk about Notion here for a second, guys. Okay,
What is
Notion,
Josh?
Okay, if I could put Notion into a phrase, this is what I would put it into. I wrote this down. I prepared. Okay. Collaborative documents on steroids. Okay.
Ooh.
Um,
AKA his brain.
in my brain. But one thing the other thing I think of when I think of Notion is, and they have this on their website, their whole thing is about like basically bringing order to information in chaos. Okay. Like this is how I would define Notion. Is it is a tool that it attempts to give you a lot of things available to you to kind of basically order information. Now that takes a lot of different forms. We're going to focus today on, I think, how it applies to education. I use it at a whole different level where I literally manage like all of my tasks and project management in it, and it works for that too. But I think it has some other value for education where.
So the quick list, right, is that as I hit my mic, you think I'm new here.
Well, I mean, we are.
We use it for our website.
Yeah,
it is our website. We use it to plan the podcast.
Yep.
We use it for general note taking. Josh uses it for project management. Josh uses it for personal notes. Like we use it. There's every option is available to you with Notion, but we want to give you today some classroom ideas.
Some of the classroom ideas. I think where the classroom ideas really fit is. Again, first of all, let's mention one thing. They do have an education focus, which is great. So they focus on a lot of other things, but they do have a free for education plan, and we'll link to that, which is great. But through that, you get a lot of features, which are basically they call them blocks, but it's basically their sections of pages and information. You can basically embed information into pages, and so they give you the ability to do that unlimited. Through that, and then you can add guests and things into this. So think about the best way I can try to describe Notion is just basically think about how you use Google Docs, how you use some of the collaborative document tools we shared about, right? There are pages where you write text, you can embed media, you can do all of this type of stuff, but it adds on top of that kind of this database organization system that you can embed right in the pages that you create. And all of that can be shared publicly with people. And even turned into a website, hypothetically.
Hypothetically, like we did.
So like even like Will and I, like we manage the entire website from Notion. We easily share things with each other. And that sounds like, Josh, why would I want to deal with that in education? Well, I don't know. Hypothetically, you wanted to create a wiki. With all of your students, right? And you want to organize information. You want to let your students build out pages of information. You want to organize it, but you want to be able to have all of them collaborate together, comment with each other, edit each other's work, provide feedback, and then them to be able to like publicly share that and hold on to it as a standing resource. Notion could do all of that. Now, I will say the downside to Notion is this. I always give this caveat to people. It is not, because there's so much in the tool, it can kind of feel like you're jumping in a very large ocean initially. I think, Will, you've seen that, right?
I often call for life rafts.
Yes.
I'll be like, Josh, how do I do this?
Yes, but that's the unfortunate part Will gets with working with somebody like me who loves Notion. But Notion also has a bunch of templates. So I took a quick look, and we'll link out to this in our resource page. But they have a whole page of templates, and you can literally just click on it, click start with this, and they'll give you everything you need. You don't have to go through all the work like we did on our end and I do on my stuff and setting up from scratch. And I think they have like 5 different versions of wikis that you could create if you really wanted to go that way.
Wow.
So some of it's like life wikis stuff. It's, again, their whole thing is they're trying to help you organize information. I think if I could really define what theirs is, they're trying to bring order to all of this, and so they try to provide you anything they can to do that. And so I think that's just, couple other notes. You can embed any kind of media, video into there, so it could be a multimedia experience. So that's the reason I think we tied it here to this, Will, is that, like, initially I was thinking, if I could do a wiki with any tool and I was not restricted by my work restrictions, I would pick Notion. And the reason I would pick Notion is that it is something that can be a artifact that lives on beyond the course. You and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago and we came up with this idea. Throwing out an idea to someone listening to the podcast. Somebody implement it, because I can't. There's no way it's going to happen at my institution. I would love to see, like, you could use Notion to be like a long-lasting wiki and glossary of resources for people. Even think of yourself as an instructor. You could build notes inside this tool and literally just share it with your students. You can link them inside the courses, and then you can edit them in one place, and they edit across all the spaces.
So a content management system,
content management
a
system,
CMS.
a little bit too. Yeah.
Well, you say that, and I think you and I maybe had the same professor come to mind from our undergraduate who would have sincerely benefited from this. Because when I took his classes, I always bought the $10 to $15 notes package that came with his course, right? I'm just thinking to myself, could you imagine if that note package was digitized in a database you could search?
Yeah. But again, these are all large scale things. I think if you take away one thing with this, this could be a good collaborative document tool for you to use. It's not hard to get people into it. It gives you other options to organize things by. You can create tags inside the tool that people can search by. And I think this, again, Wiki to me is like the perfect place for Notion. You could create an easy wiki with some definitions and things in them, have your students contribute to it. You can give them some flexibility for how to create it. Notion comes with, you basically just hit backslash and type in images in Notion, and they give you an entire library of free to use images. So your students have flexibility to make it look cool and easy to search and find information.
One of the things I think that's a good endorsement, frankly, from Josh and myself, is that we use it for our website, right? So we trust that their copyright law policies, their user license policies, etc. Like we are putting our user generated content on there, and we have read through it, and we trust that it's safe there, that they're not going to try and take our content, delete it on their will, etc. Like, it's our content on their platform, and I think that that's a really important thing to recognize when it comes to academics, because in education, you're dealing with a ton of student content, of course, but you also have your intellectual property if you're creating lesson content in there. So it's safe. We really have respected this product, this company, since we started using it. Since Josh told me about it, I've come to the dark side. You did not need to fight hard to get me there, but it's just, I'm still just learning. You know, Josh uses it at 110%, and I feel like I'm doggy paddling some days. But I've turned around and then I've used it for some of my personal projects too, where it's been really, I think, effective, like Josh said, to create, for instance, a three-step learning path where there was a landing page, some organizational information about what this learning path encompassed, and then they could click through to path one, and that took them to a new page, which again linked down into more information from there, just like a Wikipedia page would. But you don't have to go through this space of like being involved with a public-facing forum. You know, Wikipedia comes with that risk of public engagement, public information. And so while it's like one of the best examples of wikis, it may not be the best for a classroom. Whereas a Word document, it just doesn't have the features you want today to make things beautiful, to make things, to be able to share them publicly if you'd like to, right? But primarily Notion first can be private, which can be really important for the safety and security of you and your students in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it takes that collaborative document thing to another level of kind of, it's almost like, really, honestly, it's almost like a collaborative web page more than a document. Because it just allows you to do so much inside that document and share it to people, and it feels like you're just on a website and you're looking at things.
You would send that to my, some family members, things like that, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is a nice website, Will." Like, no, you can edit it. Just click.
Yeah, just go ahead and click on it. So
It's okay. You won't break it. Well, maybe.
yeah. So again, encourage you to check it out. They've got a free for education space for it. And my biggest encouragement, because I think the biggest hurdle with it every time, is that they do so much that it can be overwhelming to try the tool. That's why I only recommend it with this understanding. Just go in, grab a template for what you want, because I almost guarantee you it's there. And you can literally just click go, and it will set some of that up for you. And they have kind of a getting started page for you that will walk you through some of the really basics. And just play around with it. At the most basic space, it might be a good place for you to provide information to your students, or to have them collaborate to build something like a basic wiki information, and it becomes something that is very usable. If you love it and you want to experiment far beyond that, you can go with the idea that Will and I had that we will never be able to implement, which is a programmatic wiki in Notion that applies across multiple courses. So go with that. Stick with that idea. Somebody take it. Yeah. Please.
We'll just plant that seed.
We'll just plant that seed because I want to see that happen. But it's a cool tool. And even if you want to see how it looks, just click on our website again and you'll see how it works.
Yeah. It, in some senses, because Josh said that it's a block-based, that's their language, but it's a block-based web development platform. Everything operates in a square or rectangular block.
Yeah.
And so it's not something where you can imagine like a piece of paper, like I can write in the middle of the page, I can write on the left middle of the page, I can write in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. Like in Notion, you can get there, but you have to design your blocks effectively. And I think that's actually a helpful way to consider it, because the web, the internet is built on that kind of system. And so often we're trying to make websites look like we can imagine them, but it's all computers. It's ones and zeros. And so the computer's wanting to put it into a very linear and left to right logical sequence. So I don't begrudge Notion that, but it is something to be aware of when you're going in there to build content. Like you're going to build block by block. It's not line by line. If you're thinking Word document line by line, you've got to change a little bit of your thinking, because you got to think this block couldn't contain 3 lines of text, but the block itself is distinct from the next block. If I hit the enter or return key on my keyboard, that's going to make a new block, and those blocks can act independently of one another.
And if that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. You don't need to remember it. Just start typing inside the tool.
It's just the idea that if you start typing and you hit the enter key, you'll see what we mean. It will visually give you a block like layout
and
design.
That would be the one thing I would say
is
one of the advantages to this type of tool, because there's some other tools you suggested, right, that have a lot of different things. Like you get into a Miro or you get into some of these other things, and they all have their uses. But one of the troubles in a Miro is if you're doing a bunch of collaboration, if you want it to be organized, sometimes your students don't make it organized because they're in a whiteboard and they have the freedom to do whatever the heck they want to do.
You give them creativity and they use it. Dang it.
But Notion puts some of those guidelines on, and you could break them. Like I know how to break them, but that's because I've been using Notion for a while. This gives you kind of nice, clean place to work on some of that. And especially when you're dealing with stuff like wikis or content or information that you're trying to organize, it's helpful for the tool to already help you organize some of that. So yeah, I think it's a good tool. I'm going to restrict myself from any more things because I could talk about Notion for forever.
It's really encouraging to see Josh dig into this one and what he's capable of doing. And when I look at his brain, for instance, what he calls his brain is a
Second
project
brain.
management area.
Yeah.
Second brain, excuse me.
I have a first one. It's not in Notion.
It's really powerful. We are using it and thinking of it in an academic sense and a project management sense, but you could use it for marketing. You could use it for web design. You can use it for graphics development. You can use it to track anything. I've not come up against something that I didn't think it could be useful for.
Yeah.
So you want to be thinking through the idea of what it might work for your classroom.
Yeah.
So it's not the end all be all, but again, with Josh saying earlier, it's free. And considering not free, it has a free for education plan that you can use. A few limitations, but that's available to you because it's block based and text based, and because they have built it pretty well. It's also really accessible. If you consider the accessibility issues, you might not be able to, of course, have accessibility with things like embedded YouTube videos, right? But that is always going to be an issue. If you embed anything, there's some accessibility concerns. But images can have alt text. Everything's designed to be HTML based, so like it reads headers correctly, it reads line items. It's a really good platform that way for students who might have visual disabilities, etc. That is another great episode behind us. We really hope that this insight from wikis, while it's not a new thing, it is actually in some sense an old thing. It can get forgotten, so we just want to make sure that that's one of the things we advocate for, because it's a really valuable learning experience. Of course, if you're trying to do wikis, here's a great tool. Check out Notion. If you're not keen on picking up a new tool, there's plenty of ways to do wikis. I encourage you just to Google that as well. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening in. This has been Will and Josh, another episode of the High Tech Podcast, where we try and figure out how to harness technology for the physical and digital classroom. Until next time, see ya.
See ya.